born and created. Can you tell us when it was created and where?
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity you're giving us to talk about Refugee Help. Before all, excuse me for my French English. So Refugee Help is a social startup that was created in March 2017 during the startup weekend organized by Tech Refugees. So we are all we are all refugees, 90% of refugees among us, and we came from the school Simplon. Simplon is a school in all over France that train people to web development. So when we participate to this hackathon, to this startup weekend, we won the first prize by presenting a web application in order to help refugees. So now we are working on this project. It will be called Refugee Help, as the name of the social startup. And this will help the refugees in their daily life here in France.
Great. So you talk from experience. You're a refugee, and you have seen what it was like to arrive in France and in the city of Paris. Why do you think there's a need for an app like that?
Yeah, so the particularity of Refugee Help, as I said, it is that we are all refugees, and we had the experience of what is an asylum seeker. All the process that you have to undergo before getting the status of refugee. So sometimes when we were looking for this status, there was a lack of information. So that's why we said when someone comes in France as a migrant generally or as a refugee, the first thing is to find a place where to sleep. And also a place where to find something to eat. So with this application, we, for our part, we didn't have those informations. So we were trying to find ourselves the information. So this is why motivated us to create this app to help them.
And so how is tech useful for you? Especially since the people who are going to use your app don't necessarily know much about tech or know French. So how does tech help?
So actually, I will take one example. When you go to the prefectures here in Paris, generally in Paris, because it's very congested, you can see people sleeping in front of the door just to wait maybe 2 days to get inside and have only the form for the refugees. So just to fill this form. So I think with technology we can amend all this. So that's why we think that with technology it can be done online. For example, it can be dematerialized so that people can have access simply and to this form. So actually tech is very important also because refugees, when they come, they leave their country, the first thing, the main thing that they have in their hand, it's their smartphone. The smartphone is the thing that it is like the link between them and their country, and also the compass for them to be guided. So tech is very important for immigration.
So I think we're going to go straight into the core of the discussion now. Eric, do you think, what is a smart city to you? And do we live here in Paris in a smart city, according to you?
Actually, a smart city, for me, it is a city in which we use digital technology, also urban big data, in order to improve daily life of citizens. So here in Paris, are we living in a smart city? I think we are on the way. We are on the way, and Actually, we are all engaged in this challenge because we are all citizens, so we are concerned. And also, me as a member of Refu Help, Gaia, and Anna also, they are involved because their goals is to improve daily life of people. So we are all engaged in this challenge.
Gaia, Anna, do you agree with that definition of a smart city in the state we are in right now?
Yeah, I agree, and I think a very important aspect of a smart city is that the residents feel that they can impact the development of the city, not necessarily connected to tech, but tech can really help by listening to the citizens and communicate with them.
Yeah, for me it's quite interesting because as a researcher, smart city is just your digital communications are linked to Internet of Things, right? So it's the interplay between kind of these new Internet of Things approaches, so sensors, and then how we then use digital applications. Now, the problem there is I think the official definition of smart city is very top-down. It's the kind of benevolent state that sees what its citizens are doing and then provides services accordingly. And really, I suppose the question here is what we're doing, I think, is we are the fight back, which is the citizens choosing to interact with the smart city to ensure that, firstly, it is really in the interest of good. Because actually, that's not always, that's not always a given. So in the UK, there is a database that tracks rough sleepers, so people sleeping on the street, in theory, to ensure they have help. But if they are European citizens who are not getting the help, they can be expelled. They can be deported back to their countries. So that's an example of kind of smart approaches not necessarily working for the common good. And I suppose what we're doing is that questioning the power. So you asked, who is the crowd, right? Like it's that we can use tech to almost question the smart city, question the use of digital, and ensure that those who might otherwise be marginalized are actually part of that smart city.
So that was actually one of the questions we're going to talk about, which is data and tech is often synonymous of surveillance and control. And how do you make sure that this is not the case? How do you make sure that data is not used to kick people out?
I mean, that's like the million-dollar question. So as you can probably hear, I'm from the UK. We have the election today. Our likely prime minister, I think, is using the excuse of terrorism to really clamp down on internet freedoms. And also doesn't seem to understand internet freedoms that much, doesn't seem to understand encryption, and is using it as an example to push an agenda. And I suppose all we can do is ensure that civil society, including non-profits, is sufficiently educated and sufficiently open to different options that it can understand and it can challenge. Because I do think that technology, even beyond, say, state surveillance, but the fact that technology is so advanced within generally for-profit private corporations compared to other elements of society has a bit of a problem with power imbalances, because there's always the question of smart for whom, algorithms for whom, and then how data is used. So in the States, we've seen that data that was collected for good reasons could then be used for bad reasons. So a database that Obama created then is used to expel people whose only crime is being on the wrong side of an invisible border. So I think one question we need to ask as data capturers is there a switch? Can you press a button and delete all the data when the political regime changes? I don't know.
Do you guys agree? Yeah, I think you all want to talk, so who's starting?
Yes, I agree with what Gaia said. So it's a great question about protecting the privacy of the citizens. Actually, I think it's firstly a problem of also education, because sometimes people, they don't know exactly some users' terms when they use technology. So it's important to know where you are going when using new technologies, because sometimes it can be intended for a good intention, but after that they take it for maybe for economic reason. So firstly, there should be I'm trying to give some maybe solution about that, to train people about it, to educate people about what we are doing with new technologies, and also try to find, to have an adapted legislation for this problem all over the world.
So the government has a role to play, is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, another aspect of data collection, and just as you mentioned, it's really important to think about the side effects of the data. When you decide to capture data, what do we really need? Do we need the person's identity? Maybe not. Maybe it's enough with an anonymously reported thing. Because otherwise you might capture data that can be used for totally other reasons than you first were thinking.
And it's also what you mentioned before, is that non-profit are not really known for being tech savvy compared to the people they're against, you know, the corporations, the government. So it's a bit of a David and Goliath situation here. So Anna and Gaia, you've been working with with non-profits. Sorry, was it hard to get this tech mindset? Do you think that non-profit know enough about tech, about all those small issues, you know, like data protection, cryptology, and so on?
Oh, okay. Starting. Oh, okay. So, do non-profits understand technology, and do they understand it enough? I mean, I think there are a couple of answers. I think, firstly, no, probably. So you've got digitally, like there are startups that are non-profit startups. They obviously get tech, but the more established charities, senior management doesn't tend to have a technology focus, and therefore they're always playing catch up. I think sometimes it matters and sometimes it doesn't matter. So if you cook food for people in an area and all your interactions are face to face, do you need to understand technology? Probably not, right? But I think where you are dealing with a large amount of people, where you are saving data about those people, where there are potential data breaches, where, as in England, a lot of local authorities, you're using a version of Internet Explorer. The Internet Explorer stopped supporting 3 years ago, no joke, then it's not good enough. And actually, I think that's where the problem is. For people who were not digital natives, they sometimes think that technology is just kind of like Facebook, and they don't realize that they live and breathe it every day. And actually, using a version of Internet Explorer that is open to data breaches is negligent. Not updating, what was it, Windows XP? I don't know if anyone saw the British NHS. We were held ransom because somebody had decided to not pay money to update from XP. That is not good enough. You know, so I think this is the problem. And I think also, so from my learnings, I've been doing tech for good for 5-6 years. Unless digital is incorporated in the strategy, unless the strategy of the organization really incorporates digital and understands what it means to work with users, to be digital literate, ultimately they will always be playing catch up because the world's changing too quickly to just kind of half know.
Yeah, maybe I meet very tech-interested users when I'm in my job. I suspect so, but I'm amazed of the users, how stubborn and dedicated they are to actually get it going. And even if they don't know coding at all, they have decided that I'm going to self-host this and I'm going to do it. And that's really, really impressive. And that's often grassroots users, non-profits that are doing that. So probably there are often users or individuals in non-profits that's really interested by tech, and they are driving it. So yeah.
So I think that's quite interesting. So the issue of individuals within non-profits who are driving the change, I think is definitely correct. I think I'm one of those users. I can't code. And actually my team is leaving the non-profit that we're in because there isn't enough strategy. And we are actually setting up our own team that will help other non-profits ensure that digital is part of their strategy, so it's the best use of resources. And I think that's something that's interesting. Those individuals that are driving the change, there needs to be, I think, a professionalization of them so that they become the digital leaders going forward. That's my, yeah. I don't know if you have.
No? But actually, maybe you can answer another question, Eric. So we're talking about tech within the organization, and then there's the other problem of tech within the audience, the recipients of those help. Is it hard to go to refugees and explain to them how the app works, and explain to them that they will be saved, that, like, their data won't be stolen? What has been your experience so far?
Yes, actually, the experience of Refuel, before starting developing the project, we had the opportunity to visit at about 500 refugees in Paris, grants to Mr. Jack Attali of Positive Planet. And we tried first with the prototype that we have developed to show them how the app is going to be work, and they found it very useful, and they accept it rapidly. So as I was saying, many migrants, when they come, they are already aware about techs. So they knows how they can communicate, how they can be guided. So actually, with this kind of tool, this kind of application, they are directly inside it. So they can use it very easily, and we didn't have any opposition from them. But as in the app, it's only a content. It's a content application. We are not taking data from them, so it was very easy for us to present them the application.
Because we see at TechFugees that there's a lot of apps that are created, oftentimes with people who have never really worked with refugees or asylum seekers, and they want to get some data. From your experience, do you think that refugees are okay with giving data when they're such an at-risk population?
I think that refugees, they are sometimes very skeptical about giving data because many of them don't want to their identity to be known. So it's a real problem about refugees and asylum seekers, because they want to keep their identity, maybe because they don't want to have other problems like the one they got in their countries.
And Gaia, maybe you can share your experience with homelessness youth.
So I think there are two really interesting things there. So the first is, are marginalized people online? Our experience is generally that young people who are homeless have phones. They may not be like an iPhone 6, but they have a phone. There's a service in the UK that provides advice to the 5 million most disadvantaged people in the country. And the most of their access comes from iPhone 4s, right? Old phone, really cheap, easy to sell, doesn't break easily. So I think the first thing is, yeah, people are online. They might be accessing data and differently, but they're there. So that's valid. I think the other thing is something that you've really brought out, which is it's not enough to have a good idea. With all this, with people accessing and using digital tools when they are marginalized, it's about ensuring that it's doing the thing they need. The young people that call us don't seem to mind that we're saving data about them because they understand that we're using it for their cases. And actually, they're interested in not being homeless. So I think as long as they are confident that that service is helping them stop being homeless, there is less of the kind of fear around that. Also, we have no way of knowing if the data is correct or not. So actually, people might be giving us fake names. We don't know, and that's kind of okay. It's up to them. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. And with the point that you were making around people who don't understand the problem, making solutions, it's my #1 pet hate in tech for good, actually. This is a great idea. Great. Have you spoken to anyone with that problem? Oh, no. Then it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's important to think about what devices and what ways you can collect data and communicate with the ones you're trying to help, to cover all sorts of different ways. For example, telephones, Twitter, email, web, to be where the users are and in their area and their way of communicating.
Great. I think we have some times for questions. So if you have one, in English or in French, please raise your hands. There's no need to be ashamed. Yes, we have one question here.
You said that most of your apps were crowdfunded, but how do you promote them outside of conferences and stuff like this? Do you have like social medias or?
So a question about the communication.
Yeah.
Maybe, I think you mentioned crowdsourcing.
For us, we haven't done that much marketing. It has been a lot word of mouth. And thanks to our users who really create their communities, and a successful crowdsourcing project often involves a huge community outreach as well. And then we are a part of that. Our name is seen. So word of mouth is the biggest one, and online presence as well.
So not very digital. If not very scalable if it's word of mouth.
Yeah, the social or the social media presence, kind of word of mouth as well. But yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but in general, maybe you can talk about communication, how to spread awareness of the project, how to get more, homelessness people to.
Yeah, I think, was your question around crowdfunding or how people hear about projects?
It was more on how people hear about project, because that's maybe the step before crowdfunding.
Yeah, so onboarding will depend very much project to project. So in the projects that we have run at Centrepoint, we've used 3 very different approaches. So our tool that was aimed at young people that had been residents in our hostels when they were leaving, that was face-to-face. So it was working with the people, working with the young people, and directly having that communication. Whereas for the helpline, we've been incredibly lucky that we were the Christmas charity of one of the big newspapers in England. So they did all of our communications, which was great. And actually, Google AdWords, if you're a charity, you can often get Google AdWords for free. They drive between 50% to 2/3 of our traffic to the helpline. So I would really recommend free Google AdWords. And then now the strategy, because we're working with young people, is really about organic and viral marketing. So both online but also offline. And again, really understanding the paths that would get your user to your tool. So because the people we are working with might go to the council or to youth workers, we also target them in our advertising so that there's a kind of word of mouth element. Whereas with our data, the data dashboard, we did freedom of information requests to every single local authority in the country, which meant they had to know about us because they legally had to respond. So I think for each project, it's around understanding the user's journey and at what point in the journey you're intercepting them, and at that point you need to target them, is what we've done.
Do you know how you're going to do it?
So for refugee help, we have a very good energy all around us. After this startup weekend that we have won, so we also use social media to talk about our project. We also participate to conferences. So, for instance, we have one organized by us on 16th of June. It will be held at the Liberty Living Lab, so you are all invited. It's free to talk about our project. So we have, as I was saying, a great energy all around us. We are mentored by PayPal France that is going along with us in this project. So we are going now on our way. So we use these conferences, social media, to be connected with people and to talk about this project.
But I don't think you meet a lot of refugees at those conferences.
Actually, yes, but when, as I said, when we test the project, we went to see them, and as refugees, we know where to find them. So we went to the asylum accommodation to talk about also the project.
Hello? Oh, yep. So the three projects that you talked about are mostly community-based or like bottom-up, because you come from the civil society mostly. But you talked about it a bit. I think now the state itself wants to, take the tech and use it to prevent violence with like facial recognition technologies, etc. What do you think are the opportunities and also the risks of such an approach from, the top? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to let Anna think. I shoot from the hip. So I can only really speak of the UK's experience. We have a great department in government called the Government Digital Service that's all about making the government digital by default. And I think the obvious opportunities there are scale, so they're able to run more services more efficiently. I think that they can be more responsive. A lot of the actual ideology underpinning the government digital service is around being like us, user-centered, data-driven, and using digital where appropriate. So these are all great things. I think the risks are actually around surveillance and people's understanding of what good is. So, for example, in the UK, they're massively increasing investigatory powers, theoretically for terrorism, but we know that in the 70s, they had policemen pretending to be eco-activists, infiltrating eco-activist movements, sleeping with women to get their secrets. So like the government's idea of what right is often different to ours. So I think this is the thing. They need to become more tech-friendly. They need to use technology for the best use, but always there is going to be a risk of how they use that and if they understand it. So at the moment, for example, they want to stop WhatsApp being completely encrypted and have like a government backdoor into WhatsApp. There's one argument, which is that will protect citizens, but often what are you looking for? Like if you had all of WhatsApp messages, what are you actually looking for? And then you're creating security problems and potential breach areas that anyone else who understands technology a bit better than government could use. So I think there always has to be that balance between like the safety of the majority, but then also questioning what the government sees as being that common good. I wrote a piece, like a human rights piece that I can link to, that's around human rights and new technologies that maybe could be useful, because it talks about that balance between the rights of the most people, but then also what's a proportional retraction of rights for that common good. We're good?
Okay.
That's our answer.
I've seen a lot of other hands. Yes.
Hello. I have a question about, you said like all of you said that the the populations you target are indeed connected, that they have smartphones and like that you can reach out to them. But do you see a way that what you're doing using tech to help like endangered population could help reach out to the populations that are not connected? Is there any way, I don't know, like that you could, that your action could help also the people who are not digitally connected?
Yes, actually, this is a good question. Thank you. The app we are building, we also has to face this question because we don't. Firstly, it will be a web application, so for people who are connected. So without connection, you cannot get access to that app. But also, we want people to be able to download it, even if they don't have connection, even if they don't have access to internet. So actually, the problem is that we have Wi-Fi hotspot everywhere in France. So only for downloading the application won't be very difficult for them. There are even some places where they can get free connections in Paris, in all over France. So we talked about them. So there will be also, it will be an hybrid app so that they can download it and use it even if they don't have connection.
Yeah, we make sure that we are able to collect, we can collect data from text messages as well. And we tend to see a difference between cities and further out on the countryside. There are more reports made by text messages from outside cities and more reports from, for example, social media in cities. And that's probably to do with the connection.
I think any project that uses technology can ensure that it helps as many people as possible by using 3 key approaches. So one is personas, one is user journeys, and one is ensuring that they have as many channels as possible. So what I mean by personas is really understanding the potential people that could benefit from your service and actually giving them names. So for us, each persona, I hope, maybe this is kind of teaching you all to suck eggs, as they say in English, but so a persona has a name, you have an idea of what platforms they're using. For each of those personas, you then have to prioritize them. So it might be that at the beginning of your service, you prioritize online personas just because you can't help everyone at once. But then for each persona, you'll want to have a user journey. So what is that person doing? At what point do you want to interact with them? And then at that point, you then understand which channels you need to be on. So Ushaidi, I was saying earlier to Anna, was one of my favorite projects when I was starting in Tech for Good, because it's so simple. You could text message an online system. So the helpline, for example, is available as a free phone number. So literally anyone who can walk to a phone anywhere can contact us. You can text, and then you can contact us online. And I think no service is ever going to reach everybody. But again, it's that really understanding who you're missing. And in your monitoring and evaluation, which is something we haven't talked about yet, really ensure that you understand who's missing. And maybe in the next sprint, if you're building something, you target those people that are missing from your data. The other thing that we do, which might be appropriate for some projects, is that third parties can contact us. It doesn't have to be the young person themselves. We are most interested in the young person themselves contacting us, but a third party can contact us on their behalf, and we will help them as well. So we've had calls from people saying, I am standing next to a homeless person, what do I say? And that's okay. I think from a power point of view, it's better that they are the user, not the third party, but we accept that. And I think that those are the 3 approaches.
Hi.
Yes.
I don't know if you covered that topic before. I just wanted to know, how do you address the filter matter, like abusive reports or inaccurate ones, or this kind of things that could... I'm taking just a raw example. For example, somebody wants to annoy somebody else or whatever and try to manipulate and use the system. Though, did you think about loopholes or ways to control that as well?
Yeah, for us, when a user set up a crowdsourcing project, they can choose between somebody needs to validate a post before it goes public and is published. So that's one way of securing that the data is accurate. But it also, I mean, you can never be totally sure if you're collecting data anonymously, for example.
So, I mean, the main risk that we have would be that somebody tries to find out information about a young person that they have no right to find out about. So they impersonate a young person would be a case that we have a protocol for. And, for example, we have a policy that we never contact a young person because someone else has said that we should, if that makes sense. So we used to receive calls where someone says, I am Gaia's uncle. She is homeless. Here's her number. Can you call her? Which has a very obvious element of kind of opening for abuse there. So we just don't do that. And then in terms of like malicious contacts, it's generally a very big problem for helplines. So Childline, which is specifically for children suffering abuse, has a massive problem with those kind of calls. I don't really understand why. People are strange. But we haven't yet. So we had a couple of like Tolkien referencing contacts, which are obviously fake. But so far it hasn't been a big problem. And it's kind of thing where as we're building iteratively, we're building protocols as we go, as we need them. Obviously, someone could call us, pretend to be homeless, but they're not really gaining anything from that apart from being listened to. So if someone's lonely and needs to talk, that might be okay as well.
Actually, we don't collect data at Refugee Help, but in the future, we're going to implement chat with among refugees, and also with refugees and people who are aware of this topic. So at this moment, I think it will be a great question to answer about.
I think we have time for one more question. No? Okay. Well, it was nice having you here. Thank you for all the great questions. And